Today we're going to look at Shakespeare's The Tempest, and in particular the comments made by Prospero about Caliban. He says, "A devil, a born devil, on whose nature nurture can never stick, on whom my pains humanely taken, all lost, quite lost." These are very strong words, and a damning verdict on someone who, earlier in the play, he used to stroke and make much of. But is Prospero right? Is this a fair judgment, or is the truth more subtle and complex? There's no question that Caliban behaved appallingly, at least according to society's codes and rules of conduct, when he tried to rape or violate the honour of Prospero's daughter Miranda. In addition, Caliban shows no remorse and even laughs out loud when Prospero reminds him of the attack. "Oh ho, oh ho!" He clearly wishes that it had been successful, declaring, "Would it have been done? Thou didst prevent me. I had people else this isle with Calibans." However, in Caliban's defence, it is perhaps natural that he shows defiance to Prospero at this point. Now he is imprisoned in this hard rock and kept away from the rest of the island. This must be frustrating and trying indeed for someone who considers the island's mine by Sycorax my mother. In addition, Caliban seems to love the natural beauty of the island. When Prospero first arrived, he showed him all the qualities of the isle, the fresh springs, brine pits, barren places and fertile. This long list implies an intimate, possibly loving knowledge of the island, which he is now prevented from inhabiting fully. Caliban's love of the island is seen again in Act 3, Scene 2. In the curiously poetic lines, "The isle is full of noises, sounds and sweet airs, that give delight and hurt not." Of course, on the one hand, Caliban is desperate to reassure Stefano and Trinculo to ensure that they carry out their attempts on Prospero's life. However, the poetic beauty of peaceful phrases such as "give delight and hurt not" surely connects Caliban intimately with this magical island and make the audience realise how frustrated he must feel at being confined miserably to one solitary point and treated as a slave. Another question we must ask ourselves is whether it is fair to judge Caliban by the standards of civilized society, as would have been present in either Milan or Naples. Unlike Prospero, Caliban has never lived in a civilized city. Unlike Prospero, Caliban has not spent the early formative years of his life in Milan. His lack of contact with the civilized world is highlighted in the comic scene of Act 2, Scene 2, when he sees the jester Trinculo and automatically assumes it is a spirit who has come from Prospero to torment me for bringing wood in slowly. Further analysis of this quotation is revealing. Prospero punishes Caliban not for failing to follow his instructions, but failing to follow his instructions quickly enough. Is this completely fair? When describing Miranda to Stefano in Act 3, Scene 2, it is clear that Caliban has never seen anything like her in his entire life. He confesses, "I never saw a woman, but only Sycorax my dam." With only a witch to compare her with, it is surely unsurprising that Caliban ends up breaking one of the civilized society's rules by attempting to rape her. After all, Caliban is the product of a beautiful, natural, magical environment, an environment which is fertile, fruitful, succulent. Is it not natural for Caliban to want to be similarly fruitful and fertile and therefore procreate with Miranda? And what of Caliban's accuser? What of Prospero? Is he someone whose judgment should be trusted and counted upon? Unfairly thrown out of Milan, he is so desperate for revenge that he causes a huge storm, a tremendous tempest, to bring his enemies to this shore. Unquestionably, he must feel bitter about the behaviour of his brother and his enemy to me inveterate, the King of Naples. Could this long-term bitterness have affected his ability to make sound and rational judgments? Certainly his behaviour towards the innocent Ferdinand seems unduly harsh and humiliating. He forces him to do the same wood-carrying task as Caliban, even though he is a future king, which is incredibly onerous. He must remove some thousands of these logs and pile them up upon a sore injunction. Notice the figures here. How long would it take to pile up thousands of logs? Ludicrously, Prospero also accuses the bewildered Ferdinand of being a traitor, of being on this island as a spy to win it from me, the lord on it. This young man thinks he has just lost his father his friends for goodness sake. We have seen his torment when he refers to his weeping again, the king my father's rack. So why does Prospero treat Ferdinand so disgracefully? The reason is that he feels he must uneasy make, lest too light winning make the prize light. In other words, he worries that Ferdinand will not appreciate his precious Miranda fully if the early courtship is too easy for him. Throughout the play, Ferdinand seems utterly honourable. Does he really need this test of his love from an overprotective, power-starved despot? Prospero's insults to Caliban are extraordinarily wide-ranging. He is a slave, a tortoise, got by the devil himself, filth, hag-seed, and of course a devil, a born devil. Is this the language of a dignified former head of state? Is this the reasoned language of someone whose judgment can be trusted? Prospero claims that he took pains to help educate Caliban, and therefore gives the impression that he, Prospero, has put himself out to help Caliban. However, Caliban also put himself out to help Prospero in the early stages. He loved him, showed him the essential parts of the island to ensure he survived his shock exit from Milan. Without knowing where the fresh springs were, Prospero would have quickly run out of water. Without knowing about the fertile places, he would have struggled to find or grow food to sustain himself and his toddler daughter. In Prospero and Miranda's early days on the islands, their relationship with Caliban was far more equal, was more fair. However, Caliban's description of how Prospero should be killed is disturbingly brutal, disturbingly violent. He urges Stefano in Act 3, Scene 2 to batter his skull with a log, paunch him with a stake, or cut his throat with thy knife. It is perhaps fitting that the first killing method uses a weapon such as a log, the source of so much tedious punishment for Caliban. However, the violence of the verbs batter, paunch and cut surely give an illuminating insight into Caliban's nature. It is one thing to wish for the death of someone who persistently torments you. However, it is quite another to plan for the death in such gruesome, grisly, gory detail. The devil or not, it is hard not to sympathise with Caliban at times. He clearly suffers terribly from Prospero's magical powers. In Act 2, Scene 2, he reveals in his soliloquy that he is punished for every trifle, every tiny thing that he does wrong. Sometimes Prospero's spirits appear as apes that mow and chatter at me and after bite me. This punishment seems designed to cause both physical, in the biting, and mental torment in the faces pulled by the apes at Caliban. In Act 4, Scene 1, he again refers with terror to Prospero's punishments. He frets when they are outside his cave. If he awake, from toe to crown, he'll fill our skin with pinches. In other words, every single part of their bodies will be in enormous pain. But perhaps some of this sympathy evaporates when the audience hears the way Caliban refers to Miranda in Act 3, Scene 2. He sniggers to Stefano, "Aye, Lord, she will become thy bed, I warrant, and bring thee forth brave broods." This crude reference to the sexual availability of Prospero's daughter makes Caliban seem less and less a sympathetic character, irrespective of Prospero's own faults. So is he a devil, a born devil? Certainly Caliban's upbringing as the son of a witch, a cruel witch who, let's remember, imprisoned Ariel painfully a dozen years in a tree and who died before setting him free, must have affected his ability to be good. But on the other hand, is Prospero right to transfer the rules and codes of civilized society on a virtually uninhabited island? The truth, I suspect, is somewhat less clear-cut.